This is my theory about the Emperor and the Perpetuals. In the vast lore of Warhammer 40,000, there are many competing ideas about where these ancient, undying beings come from. Some say they're just anomalies, flukes of evolution, or relics of forgotten science. Others claim they were chosen, crafted, even cursed. But then I read Belisarius' Call, the great work. In it, Belisarius speaks with a Satan named Zarhulash, and Zarhulash calls the Emperor a flawed weapon. And that got me thinking, what if the Perpetuals were never meant to be separate at all? What if they were all supposed to be part of the same being? It only makes sense if one specific origin theory is true, the shaman theory. The idea that Earth's ancient psychers sacrificed themselves in a ritual to create a guardian for humanity. But something went wrong, very wrong. This is the story of the Shattered Guardian. Long ago, before the rise of civilization, humanity's first psychers, the shamans, walked the earth. They lived for countless generations, reincarnating each time they died. Their souls would drift through the sea of souls and return, reborn into new bodies, with memories that gradually awakened over time. It was not immortality, but it was close. They protected early humanity, guiding tribes through the dangers of both the material world and the unseen currents of the warp. But then, something changed. Some of them began to vanish. When a shaman died, their soul would sometimes not return. Instead, it was torn apart, devoured by terrible, formless things in the sea of souls. The shamans didn't have a name for it then, but we know it now as chaos. Fear spread among them. They knew they couldn't continue as they were. If they did nothing, they would all eventually be consumed. They needed a plan. And then, someone spoke. They recalled a strange occurrence. A pair of shamans, bound in ritual, had died at the same time. But instead of reincarnating separately, they returned as one. A stronger soul, more stable, more resistant to corruption. What if, the shaman asked, we all did this, together? What if every last one of us died at once, in a single unified ritual? Could our souls merge into something more? Not many, not a dozen, all of them. Thousands of ancient psychers, dying as one, becoming a single guardian spirit, reborn as a god in human flesh, a protector of mankind, who could stand against the coming horrors of the warp. They made their decision, and so they sacrificed themselves, willingly, in silence and unity. And from their ashes, something rose, something vast, powerful, brilliant, but as we'll see, perhaps not whole. In the years and millennia that followed the ritual, something strange began to happen. A handful of individuals were born, who were more than human. They were immortal. They walked through the ages unchanged, and they carried within them powers that no other human possessed. They would later be known as Perpetuals. The most noteworthy among them was the man who would become known as the Emperor of mankind. But he was not the only one. There was Erda, a woman of immense knowledge and psychic ability, one of the architects of the Primarch project. There was Malkador, a master of hidden knowledge and political structure, the Emperor's closest ally, and the silent force behind the Imperium's foundation. And there was Olanius Person, the Wanderer, the Wise One, who seemed to understand things even the Emperor could not. There were most likely more, but these are the most commonly known ones. These individuals were scattered across history, living in the shadows, each seemingly alone. But what if they weren't? What if they were never meant to be separate? What if they were all fragments of something greater? Let's go over how they are different and how they would fit together as a greater whole. If the Emperor was the might of the original being, then the others were what he left behind, pieces of a greater whole. Let's look at them, not just as individuals, but as aspects, each one reflecting a vital part of what humanity's guardian was supposed to be. Erda. She embodies compassion. She was one of the creators of the Primarchs, but she was also more than that. She was their mother. She nurtured them, cared for them, and when she saw the path the Emperor was walking, she made the painful decision to leave. She cast the infant Primarchs through the warp, away from the Emperor. This was her way of protecting them, from who she saw as a tyrant and a madman. Erda is the heart, the empathy and love that the Emperor so often lacks. She feels deeply, perhaps too deeply, but in a being meant to defend humanity. Love is not a weakness, it's a necessity. Malkador. He embodies structure. He is the statesman, the strategist, the architect of hidden power. He built the framework of the Imperium, founded the roots of the Inquisition, guarded the greatest secrets of mankind. Malkador is control, discipline, judgment. He sees the long game, the necessity of order. But his strength is also his flaw. He can be cold, detached, willing to sacrifice truth for stability. In a complete being, he would be the one who keeps vision grounded, who turns ideas into institutions. Olanius' person, he embodies wisdom. Older than all the others, Olanius walks through history, not as a ruler, not as an architect, but as a guide. He listens, watches, thinks, and when the time comes, he acts, not for glory, but because it must be done. Where the Emperor imposes his will on the world, Olanius flows with it. He understands what power is, and more importantly, when not to use it. He is the conscience, the balance, the quiet voice of reason that the Emperor so often silences. And the Emperor himself, he is the will, the fire, the blade forged in sacrifice. He carries the raw psychic power of the original being, the vision, the strength, the purpose. But without the heart, without the discipline, without the wisdom, he is incomplete. Brilliant, yes, powerful beyond compare, but isolated, cold, and deeply flawed. So, what went wrong? If the shaman's plan was to create a single guardian, a psychic god of unified purpose, why did their sacrifice result in fragments instead of a whole? The truth is, we may never know for certain. But here are a few of the theories. At the time of the ritual, the warp was not just a place. It is a reflection, a storm of emotion, thought, and chaos incarnate. And by the time the shamans attempted their ritual, it was already changing. The ritual, powerful though it was, happened inside this growing storm. It's possible the merging failed because of this interference, that the moment of soul fusion was twisted, fractured, as the warp surged around them, that instead of one soul, many were born. The raw forces of chaos, rage, change, despair, excess were coalescing. The primordial minds that would become the chaos gods were watching, hungering. So maybe it was not an accident at all. When the shamans began their ritual, the warp noticed. As their souls began to merge, something reached out, not with words, but with claws of raw concept. Rage, greed, entropy, control. The shamans were trying to forge a god of hope, and the beings in the warp would not allow it. So, they struck, in the final moments of formation, just as the soul was solidifying. The entities of chaos smashed it, shattering the unity, splintering the being, before it could become whole. The result was not one perfect guardian, but many flawed echoes. Or perhaps the failure was internal, perhaps even at the moment of sacrifice. The shamans were not truly united. Some feared the consequences, some doubted, some clung too tightly to their own essence. And when the moment came, they could not fully let go. Whatever happened, no matter what went wrong, the result was not one perfect being. It was many shards, powerful but flawed beings scattered through time. The largest shard, the most powerful, became what we now call the Emperor. But the consequences of the ritual's failure were written into his every action. He was born with vision, but not patience, with power, but not compassion. He sought unity, but through domination, peace, but through endless war. He distrusted others, he hoarded secrets. Even as he guided humanity toward the stars, he silenced dissent and manipulated those closest to him. He did not share power because he could not. The pieces of himself, Erda, Malkador, Olanius, each held traits he lacked. But instead of drawing them closer, he pushed them away. Erda fled. Malkador served, but always in the shadows. And Olanius, he watched from the edges of history, waiting until the moment truly mattered. In the end, it was not the Emperor who reminded himself of humanity's worth. It was Olanius' person, the quiet soul, the conscience of a god, returned in human form, who gave him the clarity to strike. Because no matter how powerful the Emperor was, he was never whole. Maybe it was never meant to work. Maybe trying to forge a god from human souls was always doomed to fail. Or maybe it almost worked. Maybe the Emperor wasn't a mistake, just a fragment, a single note when there should have been a chord. We often ask why the Emperor made the choices he did. Why was he so brilliant, but also so blind? Why did he build an imperium that could not survive without him, yet refused to share the truth with those who might have been able to help carry it? The answer might be simple. He was never meant to carry it alone. And perhaps that's the tragedy of it all. The Guardian was born, but scattered. Erda, Malkador, and Lanius, echoes of a soul that could have been. They were never just allies. They were never just perpetuals. They were pieces. And what we are left with is a broken god, bound to a throne. His empire a shadow of his dream. And in the endless silence of the warp, the other pieces of the Guardian he was meant to be still drift, watching, waiting, remembering. And perhaps one day, those pieces will find their way back to each other and become whole once again.